being anti-fascist does not give you the right to do whatever you want to somebody that you perceive as fascist. Why? I'm going to talk about it. Hi, I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick, and today we're going to talk a little bit about this sort of rise of what I call anti and phobia culture. Now, it's not so much the people who have legitimate phobias, right? If you have a fear of heights, I think it's agoraphobia. You have a fear of heights. You're terrified. You can't look down over a tall building or large cliff, something like that. There's one about a goose. You're terrified that somehow a goose is watching you. It's more about the things that are like homophobia, transphobia, these sort of labels that just sort of get thrown out left, right, and center. We're going to get to that. A couple of housekeeping matters. First, we had some comments from our video last week about logical fallacies. And these were fun comments. I got hate mail. It's a great getting hate mail. Bald Griffith said to me, "Thanks for the information, but I feel like you've taken too long the idea when you could have made it much shorter." I didn't realize that a 10-minute podcast was too long for you, Bald Griffith, but thank you for commenting. Do appreciate it. And I got another great one. This one is fantastic. At UZPVNUCAAQDF, you know this is going to be good when it comes from a string of letters like that. It is a warning he applied to my video. Hey folks, appeal to authority is not a logical fallacy. There is a similar sounding fallacy that is called false authority, and Nick here gave appeal to authority that description. He equivocates a lot on this channel, so stay frosty. Well, at UZP, I'm not going to use your entire handle because that's absurd. Love that you watched all my videos in order to determine that I equivocate. Really glad that you engaged with all the content. Love that you were here for it, and really enjoyed the fact that you had a strong opinion about what I said. Now, that being said, if you were to go on Google for, 10 seconds, you'd find out that whatever you were talking about, I was right, you were wrong. And that's okay. It's fine that I'm right, you're wrong. We live and we learn. I hope you enjoy. I hope you keep watching the videos, and I hope you keep warning people about my equivocation, apparently. Anyways, back to what I was saying, because I wanted to take a little brief, silly detour before we got a little bit more in the weeds. We justify a lot of our actions nowadays because we label stuff, right? It's fun for us. And maybe the name of this video should be labeling culture as opposed to phobia and anti-culture. I'm going to use the fascism title because anti-fascists are the most direct correlation to that. Now, I'm not going to go so far as to say that there's a group of people called Antifa. I don't know that there is a group of people called Antifa. I don't know that there's an organization called Antifa. Now, it's a shorthand for people who have deemed themselves to be anti-fascist. First and foremost, pretty much everybody on the planet is anti-fascist, right? Fascist governments benefit nobody except the fascist. Here's the problem when you say, I'm anti-fascist and they are fascist. Wouldn't you fight back against a fascist? Like, if you knew somebody was a fascist and they were walking down the street, wouldn't you say to yourself, hey, I should take a swing at this guy, right? You've justified it. You've created the justification in your head for violence. And it's completely reasonable if you follow the chain of logic. Hitler was a fascist. We went to war against Hitler to take him down. Same with Mussolini. We were in a Cold War with Stalin for a long time. And Stalin was more fascist than he was socialist or communist. Like, let's just be clear about that. That's not a support of communism. It's just saying what he was. That justifies the violence against a fascist. Therefore, if I am anti-fascist, I'm basically a hero. I'm basically a hero. Like, I've labeled myself anti-fascist. I'm basically the hero. And what does the hero get to do in every single story that we've ever read? Well, let's just take Batman, for example. What does Batman get to do that we normal human beings don't get to do? He gets to go around and punch criminals in the face with no consequence. Now, don't get me wrong. I love Batman comics. Big fan of Batman comics. And I love the whole story and the kind of ins and outs of Batman. I'm obsessed. We used to understand that we are not Batman. Like day in and day out, we understood that that's not us. Excuse me. We don't understand that as much anymore. And I think it's a problem. I think it's a mix of being chronically online and absorbing the sort of extreme language we use online where we're hurling insults at each other from behind computer screens. And you're hurling these insults, and it really doesn't matter because you're insulting somebody you're never going to meet. They may not even be real, for all you know. You might be arguing with a Russian bot. But as you make those arguments, like millennials, it's a little bit different. We sort of grew up with normal human interaction being our main bit. And then the internet culture got added onto it. Younger people, it's a little bit different. Younger and older people, actually, the two spectrums. Because that became the main form of communication. And as that became the main form of communication, that can't help but twist your mind somehow. Another really good example of kind of that twisting of the mind and sort of the justification of behavior is where you don't say, well, I'm anti this. No, you say you're something phobic. For example, I don't have to listen to your opinion because you're homophobic. And how do I know you're homophobic? You said something I don't like, particularly, obviously, in the area of LGBTQIA. Do I have to say the plus? I have no idea. Don't get me wrong. There are plenty of homophobic people on the planet. I've said before on a previous podcast that there's, most hatred or evil action actually comes from fear. So I don't actually disagree with the use of a homophobic label on somebody who seems to hate gay people. We've just expanded the definition of what hate is. We've expanded it beyond what could even reasonably be considered a definition of hate to, just a mild disagreement. And as we do that, well, that's another, again, justification. A justification for not listening, another justification for no longer speaking, another justification for stopping conversation. And it's dangerous. It's dangerous. Not because we shouldn't call out hateful action when we see it. Again, hateful action, not necessarily hate itself. We should call out hateful action, 100%. But because it gives you permission to no longer consider the other person a human being. That I don't like, and that I think is dangerous and is part of this rise of labeling culture. Truth be told, you have no idea what that person hates or dislikes. You don't get to just, stop them from speaking. You could certainly walk away from them. You're not required to have a conversation with them, but you don't get to silence them, deplatform them, demonetize them, because, quite frankly, their speech is as protected as yours. Their actions are not. Keep that in mind. Their actions are not. Their speech is just as protected as your speech. And the speech is not really part of the problem. It's the actions that are justified once you place that label on somebody. And keep in mind, you're placing the label on them. The reverse of that is I'm placing the, anti-fascism or anti-homophobia label on myself. I'm justifying my actions because I am the Batman, the anti-fascist, the anti-homophobia. I am the Batman of that realm. I'm justifying my action against you because you are fascist, you are homophobic, you are X, Y, or Z. And don't get me wrong, I've gotten through all of this using sort of the obvious hot button topic examples, but it goes both ways. I don't like where the labels of throwing around calling every single Democrat a socialist is coming in, because most Democrats are not socialists. And most socialists don't consider themselves communist. They just don't. But if you label someone a communist, we immediately think of Stalin or other communist regimes, and we immediately justify in our head any action we want to take against them. It's the same thing, just in the other direction. Of course, some people would argue that fascism, loops around. Communism and fascism basically loop around into the same thing. They're not right or left. They're just bad. But it's the justification of any action we wish to take by placing that label on someone, and placing that label on someone enough times where they lose all agency and they lose all sense of right. And we can do whatever we want to them. And if this has seemed to be a confusing sort of winding road, it's because there's not really a good solution. Because I don't know how to tell an 18-year-old who's chronically lived on the internet, hey, that label you've been using for people, well, you can't. Not without a good justification. And the justification is not as low a bar as you think it is. If it is that low of a bar, well, then you end up with Charlie Kirk. And you end up with violence. And that's what the founding fathers of this country were trying to avoid, was violence over political speech. They had some experience with it. I think the long and short of it is we're just not good at being human beings. Yeah, I don't like it. But then again, what do I know? I'm just a dummy who happens to have a microphone and a camera. And an audience with people like Bald Griffith and at UZP. Once again, I'll do my best not to equivocate here for you at UZP. I don't like where we're going. We're halfway there. All the way there is just civil war. I'd say we're halfway there, and I don't like it. We can still go back. And I think we will. I don't think we're that dumb. But then again, I am against the rise of labeling culture, specifically the phobia and anti-labels. And if you liked that, like and subscribe. If you didn't like that, thank you for listening anyway. I appreciate it. I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick. Have a great day.